15 spine-chilling horror tales from Reddit. Discover the sinister, haunted, and unexplained. Jess never believed in urban legends, until now. Her peaceful life in the suburb of Springdale began shattering with every notification from that Reddit thread. Whispers in the night, flickering streetlights, shadowy figures. The words gnawed at her. As she tucked Sophie and Max into their beds, a chill enveloped her, as if the shadows in the corners of their cozy home were alive, watching, waiting. The tales felt like a pull on her very soul as adrenaline coursed through her. At first, she dismissed it as mere storytelling, fitting for a town that looks like a postcard but feels like it's hiding something. The day after she read the thread, she noticed the porch light flickering. Just a bulb, she told herself, rubbing the back of her neck, trying to shake off the unease. But then murmurs seeped into her ears. Neighbors whispered instead of laughed as they did before. It wasn't just that. Through the day, she saw flickering lights in the woods bordering their street and felt strange eyes upon her when she walked to her car. The warmth of her home clashed with the icy fingers of fear gripping her heart. She felt more awake during her long night shifts at the hospital, staring into the faces of patients while her mind wandered back to the tales of missing people on top of the chilling stories just a few blocks away. One evening, as she settled down on her couch trying to steal a moment of peace, the phone buzzed. "Did you hear about Melissa?" a friend texted from the thread. "She's gone, just vanished." Jess's heart raced. Melissa was her closest friend, a trusted babysitter. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jess wrestled with the idea of getting the police involved. What would they even do? Keep the peace? Protecting shadows emerging in the dead of night wasn't in their job description. The twinkle of her kids' laughter drew her focus back, but it felt like music fading off key. As nights morphed into a cacophony of unsettling events. Every sound seemed amplified. The creak of the floor, a whisper of wind, the hollowness of silence. Something stirred just outside her window. The tension coiled tighter each evening. There were reports of kids huddled together, speaking in undertones of a man in the dark. She peered outside one night, the moon casting ghostly shadows across the lawn. The flicker of movement pierced her soul. It was just another night of supposing they were safe, but when she closed her eyes, it felt wrong. Each night became a game where she put her kids to bed with a smile while her heart raced, knowing that honesty was now a luxury she couldn't afford. As Jess prepared to confront the shapes of dread as they hollowed her world, a figure loomed at her door, whispering her name, sending a shiver through her spine. Was it a friend or the beginning of something darker? In that moment, she questioned everything. In the depths of these urban legends, was there a truth she'd rather not face? An ugly realization settled in. Family bonds could be twisted against her. The shadows crept closer, and Jess was about to step into a web of darkness where nothing was what it seemed. The whispering grew louder, echoing in the dim hallway, wrapping around Jess like a cold shroud. The figure outside her door was still, its presence huge and unsettling. Heart pounding, she took a step back, tearing her eyes away from the silhouette. "Hello?" she called out, her voice quivering. No answer came, only the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Fear gripped her throat as she glanced back at her sleeping children, blissfully unaware of the terror lurking beyond. Her mind raced through the horror stories. Were they real? Was this the opening act of the nightmare that had swept through Springdale? What if the stories were true? Her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table and pulling her attention back. "Get out now!" A text from her friend Amanda jolted her. Her heart skipped a beat. "Please, Jess, it's not safe." The figure at the door shifted, an imperceptible movement that sent her pulse into overdrive. Jess felt the weight of the darkness crushing her, and like a reflex, she gripped the edge of the counter, breath catching in her throat. Should she call the police now? But would they even believe her? What if they came and found nothing, ridiculing her fears? Steeling herself, she reached for the doorknob, heart pounding. But a child's giggle broke the tension, a sound so innocent it felt wrong. It was Sophie and Max, stirred by her anxiety. They crept into the hallway, sleepy-eyed and bewildered. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Max yelled, pulling at her skirt. The question hung in the air as Jess stood frozen. The figure outside stirred again. In a blur of instinct, Jess hurled herself toward the front door, opening it wide. The cold night air rushed in, yet the porch remained eerily empty. Just shadows bending under the moonlight, no sign of anyone. "Is someone there?" she shouted into the night, and her own voice felt weak, lost in the vastness. Sophie tugged on her sleeve, looking up with wide eyes. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Stay close," Jess commanded, the protective instinct surging through her. She stepped outside, the wooden boards groaning beneath her feet as she scanned the darkness beyond the rectangle of light spilling from the house. Suddenly, a rustle came from the nearby woods, growing louder, winding back toward her. Panic seized her heart. She turned to shove the kids inside, slamming the door. What was stalking them? A dark stranger? Or had it come from the very shadows that twisted around their lives? Jess was burning with a need to uncover what was plaguing the town. There had to be more to the stories. The next day, a flurry of gossip erupted at work. A nurse mentioned a recent rash of disappearances, hints of something lurking beneath the surface. Each explanation felt like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. Could it be connected to the vibrant yet treacherous stories circulating around Springdale? When she returned home, the whispers began again. Vague murmurs flitting through the air, muffled and indistinct, as though the shadows were alive with secrets. Her nerves trembled like a taut wire, wanting to snap. She rounded the corner toward the kids' room, only to hear a soft voice call her name from the darkness. "Mommy, come play with us." The invitation felt wrong. Panic twisted in Jess's stomach. Who was it, really? Before she could rationalize, she turned and sprinted back to them. But a figure loomed behind her, just a flicker in her peripheral vision, gone as fast as it appeared. Jess hesitated, staring into the dark corridor behind her. A choice danced dangerously close. To confront the unseen terror, or to shield her children from whatever lurked in the shadows? She breathed deeply, whispers growing louder. She had to know. What secret awaited her in the darkness? A cold sweep of dread brushed over Jess as she stood, heart hammering, the shadows whispering her name softly from the corners of her mind. She stumbled back toward the living room where Max and Sophie were, their gazes wide and searching. The jovial daybreak had hidden an ugly truth under the surface of Springdale, and she could feel its tendrils creeping into her home. "Mommy?" Max asked, and the innocence in his voice twisted the blade deeper into her heart. "Let's just stay together, okay?" she urged, trying to calm the rising tide of panic. Jess could still hear the muffled echoes of the darkness. They were getting louder, insisting she listen. And somewhere in that cacophony was a voice she almost recognized, a thread of memory woven tight with fear. She moved to the window, cautiously parting the curtain, and peered out. The street looked perfectly ordinary, bathed in the golden hue of the fading afternoon sun. Neighboring houses stood silent, their windows blank and watchful. No movement, just shadows shifting in the corners, like remnants of some long-forgotten tragedy. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice trembled. Nothing, sweetie. It's okay, Jess lied, forcing a smile even as her stomach nodded. She needed to find the truth, to quell the darkness cocooning her family. She grabbed her phone again, dialing Amanda. The line rang, echoing endlessly as the whispers pierced through. The voice in her head started to rise above the rest. Find him! Find him! What did it mean? Who was him? Was it an echo of the nightmare, or was there something real out there they hadn't seen yet? "Mommy!" Max cried, pointing toward the hallway. Jess turned sharply, pulse racing. She followed his finger to the shadowy recess. It stretched longer, dark and consuming, wrapping itself around the walls like a predator. "We need to leave, now!" she snapped impulsively. Gathering her children close, she tried to keep the edge from her voice, but urgency clawed at her gut. Suddenly, the front door swung open with a creak. Jess froze as cold air flooded in, whispers spilling through the threshold like a taunting seduction. There was no one there, just the dark, beckoning them with ghostly fingers. "Come play with us," the unnerving voice called again, this time softer but closer. Jess's heart sank. It wasn't just a child's voice. There was a darkness in it, a malevolent glee intertwined with the innocence. "Mommy, I want to go outside," Sophie declared, a dreamy look in her eyes. It was as if she didn't hear the sinister tone threading through the air. "No, no, you can't!" Jess gripped Sophie's shoulders, shaking her gently to snap her back to reality. "You don't understand. We can't go outside." Max, still too young to grasp the danger, echoed, "I want to play." The pressure in the air shifted, something palpable moving underneath the surface. It felt like a tone in a symphony shifting urgently, as if a crescendo was building them toward an inevitable anxiety. Jess turned to the door again. The echoes whispered louder, "Come see, come play, come join." Sweat dripped down her back as she hesitated, caught in the gravity of the moment. Was she imagining it, or was there truly something hiding in plain sight, wrapping tighter around their lives? "No!" she screamed, shutting her eyes, desperate to drown out the voices. But just then, a laugh echoed from the hallway, joyous, yet filled with an underlying malevolence. It didn't belong to her children. And then, from the shadows, something emerged. An outline, dark and twisting, creeping toward her with an unnatural grace. "Help us, Mommy, please," it called, the words venomous, dripping with a mockery that froze Jess to her core. She was paralyzed, staring at the shadow that danced closer, that lured with terrifying enchantment. What was it truly? How deep did the darkness go? As Jess felt darkness wrap around her, drowning out the screams and protest from her children, she knew one thing for certain. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, and what her family faced was far from ordinary. The whispers grew louder as she finally stepped back once again, leaving the children behind. The shadows had something to say, and she was ready to listen. But just what would she become in the process? Jess blinked. Hard, trying to shake off the paralysis that had gripped her. There it was again, that mocking laughter seeping into her very bones. It didn't belong in her home. She felt the shadows reaching for her, fingers tangling in her hair and pulling gently, luring her deeper into their embrace. "Max! Sophie!" she shouted, voice breaking. Panic churned in her chest like a storm. She tore her gaze from the encroaching darkness, forcing herself to look back at her children, who stood frozen with wide, glassy eyes, mesmerized. A flicker of terror ignited within her. "Get back, now!" Sophie blinked, and the light returned to her eyes just for a moment, a brief candle flickering against the wind before darkness reclaimed her gaze. "I want to play," she cooed dreamily, stepping toward the door. "No, you can't!" Jess lunged forward, snatching her daughter's arm just as Sophie was about to step into the cold void beyond the threshold. Max whimpered, his small frame trembling. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Stay close, please, just stay with me," Jess begged, wrapping her arms around both children, their warm bodies a brief comfort against the encroaching cold. But the shadows wove around them, knitting tighter, whispering their secrets, growing louder, crawling beneath Jess's skin. "Come join. Come play." Each utterance felt like shards of glass sliding beneath her flesh. "Mommy?" Max lifted his head, worry etched across his delicate features. "What's happening?" The question lay heavily between them, a truth they couldn't voice. Jess knew she had to get them out, but where? The world outside was a banquet of horrors, waiting to feast on their fear. "Look!" Sophie shouted suddenly, pointing toward the kitchen. "The shadows are dancing!" Jess's heart dropped as she glanced back. The kitchen light flickered, intermittently revealing a figure, its body twisted and inhuman, adorned with shapeless features. Its smile was a stretch of dark pleasure, eyes like deep wells of despair. She squeezed her children tighter, practically shaking with anxiety. "No, we're staying right here!" she screamed, struggling to keep the panic at bay. "We are safe! We're going to be okay!" But inside, doubt pulsed like a drumbeat. What was safe anymore? The illusion of safety had shattered, piece by jagged piece, just like her sanity, as the figure in the kitchen beckoned with invitingly twisted fingers. "Mommy!" called the figure, its voice sweet, syrupy. "Come see what we've found for you." Jess moved slowly backward, dragging her children, her instincts screaming to run, to hide. "Let's find Amanda! We need her!" "Mommy, no!" Max cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I don't want to leave you." The whispers fused together, climbing to a terrifying crescendo, and Jess urged them onward, their feet pounding the cold wooden floor. They staggered past the looming darkness that seemed alive, pulsing with need. But as they reached the hallway, the walls shifted. The familiar space twisted into something foreign. Shadows extended like fingers, pushing against Jess, snaking past her, flanking her path. "You can't escape," they hissed. "Stay with us! Stop it!" Jess shouted, her voice fierce, yet fighting to remain steady. "You don't own us! This is our home!" The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, cloaked in nebulous, swirling black. She squeezed the hands of her children, an anchor in the chaos threatening to swallow them whole. At that moment, a deep growl resonated from the depths of the shadows. It echoed through the boundaries of their world. Would they become the next victims of this unseen threat that desperately wanted to lure them in? "Look, Mommy," Sophie said, voice trembling. "There's a door!" Surrounded by confusion, Jess's heart raced as she saw a glimmer of hope. A door, slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. Could it lead them out? She had no idea what lay behind the door or what it would demand from them, but staying where they were, that was a fate she couldn't bear to contemplate. Clutching her children tightly, she turned toward the door, steeling herself against the shadows that howled behind them. "Hold on tight," Jess urged, as they raced toward a precipice of uncertainty. But the whispers rose to a fever pitch, a terrifying cacophony that drowned out all rational thought. Would they find salvation, or would the truth lurking just out of reach be the very thing that shatters everything they hold dear? With a burst of adrenaline and fear, they pushed through the door, unaware of what awaited them on the other side. They stumbled into the room, a burst of light bleeding through the doorway and swallowing them whole. Jess's heart raced, but she froze as soon as she took in the scene around them. The room was bright, a sterile white light, stark against the oppressive darkness they had escaped. But everything felt wrong. The air was heavy, almost thick, and the comforting flicker of hope faded quickly. Her eyes trailed down the walls, lined with photographs, smiles captured in frames, faces distorted in shadow. Max gasped, gripping her hand tighter. "Where are we, Mommy?" The photos seemed to watch them, the expressions frozen but full of dread. Each picture was of a family, yet there was something unsettling in their smiles, an underlying horror that whispered to Jess, they never left. "Keep moving," Jess urged, her voice shaking. She cast a quick glance back through the doorway, which now seemed to shimmer, a translucent veil holding back a storm of darkness. Safe? It certainly didn't feel like it. Sophie walked ahead, the cheerful little girl now reduced to a ghost of her former self. "Look, Mommy," she called, pointing to a door at the far end of the room, away from the shadows they'd just escaped. "Keep close," Jess demanded, but her daughter was already drifting away, drawn to the door as if it were glowing. Max pulled at Jess's sleeve, his face pale. What if it's worse? His small frame trembled with fear. "I don't know, Max." Sophie giggled softly as she stepped closer. "I want to see!" But Jess felt a chill run down her spine. The shadows breathed behind them, a low hum like distant thunder. That's when she noticed the pictures again. Each family bustled with life, but felt hollow. With every heartbeat, she felt their eyes follow her, filling Jess with unease. It was as if each happy smile held a story lost to despair. "Sophie!" Jess shouted, panic rising again. "Don't!" But it was too late. Sophie turned the doorknob, and it creaked open, revealing darkness once more, swallowing the light. A draft of chilling air burst from the cavity, sending shivers down Jess's spine. "I want to go in!" Sophie pressed forward, feet already crossing the threshold. "Stop!" Jess lunged, pulling her daughter back, just as something recoiled from the darkness. A whisper slithered past her ears, chilling her blood. "We have to go now!" "Mommy!" Max screamed, his voice piercing through the air. "She's gone!" The hallway behind them twisted ominously. The cheerful light flickered as if warning them to choose wisely. "The door is ours," the shadows murmured, growing louder. "Bring her back, or join her." It was a choice wrapped in terror. Jess's heart thudded painfully in her chest. Her mind raced. Would following Sophie into that void be the rescue they needed, or would it seal their fate? The laughter echoed again, a cruel reminder that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. "Make your choice, Jess." With desperation boiling over, she turned to Max, searching his fearful eyes. "We have to save your sister." But as she stepped towards the door, the shadows surged, molding around her ankles like icy fingers. "You can't claim what you don't understand," they hissed, pulling her back with malicious intent. Jess fought against the dark pull, breath hitching. "No! Stop!" Max's whimpers grew louder as he clung to her. "Mommy, please don't go!" The air thickened, reality fading under the weight of their terror. But Jess refused to let go. With all her strength, she shoved herself forward, ready to dive into the darkness for her children. And just as she crossed the threshold, the shrill laughter erupted, time stretching and warping like a carnival mirror. What waited for them on the other side? Would they emerge stronger or lose every piece of hope? In that fleeting moment, Jess felt the world spin out of control, and she held her breath, consumed by the uncertainty of their fate. The world came crashing back, not with a gentle touch, but with a hard, unforgiving thud. Jess landed on cold, unforgiving ground, her hands pressing into a damp surface. Panic swelled inside her, nearly choking her as she gasped for breath. "Mommy, where are we?" Max's voice trembled in the darkness. erasing any potential safety in this new realm. "Stay close to me," she commanded, the fear clawing at her throat. The darkness was alive, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. Shadows shifted and pulsed just beyond their vision, whispering promises that twisted her stomach into knots. "Sophie! Over!" "Here!" came a distant, sing-song voice, not from the hall, but deeper within the encroaching black. Jess's heart raced. "Don't move! I'm coming!" The ground beneath her felt uneven, as if it were a living thing. She reached for Max, her fingers trembling as she found him, desperately clutching her hand. Together, they moved forward, hearts pounding in sync. Each step generated muffled echoes, shadows blurring past them, feasting on their fear. Jess squinted, straining to catch a glimpse of her lost daughter. But the more she looked, the more the darkness deepened, sucking away the small light they had. The laughter returned, a haunting melody that danced around them, circling like a predator, taunting their helplessness. "You will find her, if you dare," it intoned, smooth as silk, dripping with malice. "Jess," Max whimpered, his grip tightening. "What is happening?" "I don't know," she breathed, trying to mask the terror in her voice. "But we have to keep moving." They pressed forward again, the shadows yawning and slithering, almost appearing to open pathways, as if inviting them deeper into the abyss. Suddenly, a figure darted across the distance, short and quick, like a fleeting memory. Jess's breath caught. "Sophie!" she screamed, desperation underscoring her voice. But the darkness swallowed the sound, returning nothing but the laughter, louder now, closer. "Do you hear that?" Max whispered, eyes wide as they darted around. A low rumble echoed, a distant chorus of voices curling from the depths. It sounded like murmurs of long-forgotten souls. Jess's heart lurched. "We need to keep going. Don't look back." As they moved further in, the whispers grew clearer, mingling with the giggles of children playing, sweet, innocent, and twisted. "It's a game! Come play with us!" But Jess knew better. Each muffled tone dripped with deception, souring her stomach. "This isn't a game," she snapped, yanking Max away from the tantalizing sound pulling at his senses. And then, through the chaos, she stumbled upon it, a flickering light, softer than the rest, but undeniably present. "Look," she urged, pulling Max closer, hope kindling within her chest. They raced toward the glow, but as they drew near, it twisted. The light morphed into an ethereal figure, like a reflection flickering in a broken mirror. It was a woman, eyes hollow, mouth stretched into an eerie smile. "Find her," she whispered, "or join us." "Don't listen," Jess shouted, instinctively shielding Max with her body. The figure faded, but the whispers rushed back in like an angry tide. "Join us." The sickening urge to obey churned in Jess. She fought against it, focusing on the vast emptiness that surrounded them, battling the laughter and despair that echoed like a haunting tune. "Hold on to me, Max," she urged, her voice a desperate plea. But the laughter intensified, drowning out her thoughts. The shadows thickened. She felt fingers clutching at her legs, pulling her toward the very darkness she had fought against. In that moment, a bone-chilling realization dawned. No matter how close they were to Sophie, the shadows would never truly let them escape. Not without a price. Suddenly, a piercing scream ripped through the night. It was Sophie's voice, echoing from somewhere distant yet near, intertwining with the chaos. "Help me!" Jess's heart shattered. "We're coming, Sophie!" she cried, adrenaline surging. The shadows recoiled momentarily, letting out a dreadful hiss. They must hurry, but time was slipping faster than they could grasp. With one last glance at Max, Jess steeled herself, their bond a beacon of hope against the crushing darkness. "Hold on tight," she shouted, preparing for the plunge into the unknown, praying it wouldn't be the end. But as the shadows closed in again, a whisper hissed through the air, slithering through her bones. "You cannot save them all." And just like that, the world behind them folded into the depths, leaving Jess to wonder whose screams would haunt her dreams from here onward. Would they reclaim Sophie, or would they too become lost in the veil of darkness? The shadows swallowed them whole, a suffocating grip that refused to loosen. Jess trod carefully, each step feeling as if she were wading through thick smoke, the air laden with unspoken threats. Max's fingers squeezed her hand tighter, his small frame trembling next to hers. "Mommy, I don't like it here," he whimpered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I, honey, but we have to keep going. We need to find Sophie," Jess whispered back, fighting against the rising dread. Before them, the path twisted and turned, leading them toward the echoing cries that seemed to bounce off the walls of the void. "Sophie!" Jess called again, her throat raw. With every shout, the darkness seemed to pulse in response, thrumming beneath their feet like a heart beating just for them. Or perhaps a countdown. "There she is!" Max pointed, eyes wide with fear and determination. A flicker of gold, Sophie's hair glimmering briefly in the haze. "Stay with me," Jess instructed as they pressed on, her heart hammering. But the shadows thickened, curling around them like tendrils. With every breath, Jess struggled to maintain her focus, to resist the dread nipping at her heels. The laughter returned, a sinister echo that seemed to shift and shape into words. "Come play, Jess. Come play with us." The voices taunted, sweet yet chilling, pricking at her skin. "No!" she shouted, clenching Max's hand. "Stay away from us." The words felt weak, as if the dark could ignore her defiance. But the more they resisted, the more the shadows pressed, an unyielding force threatening to draw them in, to claim them as theirs. Each pass of the chill air sent icy fingers tiptoeing down her spine. "Keep moving," Jess urged, her heart on fire for Sophie. They rounded a corner and stumbled into an expanse filled with white mist, swallowing them whole. The air grew colder, wrapping around them like an icy shroud. It felt wrong, unnatural, and yet something stirred within the mist. "Mommy, what's that?" Max whispered. There, at the edge of their vision, stood a figure, smaller than life, almost childlike. "Sophie?" Jess called hopefully, her voice trembling. "Come play with me." The figure beckoned, voice melodic yet distorted. "No! Sophie wouldn't say that!" Jess yelled, the realization crashing down like a weight. This was no longer a game. Whatever it was, whatever they had encountered, it was luring them in. She pulled Max closer, stepping backward, aware that retreating was just as perilous. The figure, cloaked in shadows, shivered. "You can't run forever," it cooed, its voice dropping to a twisted rasp. "Your time is short." With every word, the air thickened, catching in Jess's throat like a storm gathering intensity. "Sophie!" she cried again, desperation twisting every word. Then, out of the mist, blared another scream, a sound so raw and filled with anguish, it shattered Jess's heart into splinters. "Help me! Sophie!" It was her voice, drenched in panic. Jess jerked forward instinctively, but something yanked her back, cold and unyielding. Shadows wrapped around her in a vice grip, ripping her feet from the ground. "Mommy!" Max screamed, terror raw in his voice as the shadows began to consume them. "No!" Jess fought against the darkness, clawing at the grasping shadows. "Choose!" The voices echoed, a chorus of whispers suffocating her pleas. "Choose before it's too late." Panic ignited within her. The pull for Sophie warred with the need to protect Max, the tight coil of choices encircling her heart so tightly it hurt. "Let her go!" Jess screamed into the abyss, defiance spilling over in a final surge of strength. "Let her go, or take me instead!" The laughter halted, a sudden silence falling like a knife. Then she heard it. It was the faint sound of Sophie's small, sobbing breaths, a flicker of hope amidst the swirling despair. "Mommy!" Sophie's voice drifted like a memory just out of reach. But the shadows tightened around her, pulling her deeper, and Jess realized in that moment the stakes were even higher than she'd imagined. They had entered a realm of unimaginable choices, a deadly game where every option came with a grave cost. In that uncertainty, she felt something stir within the depths of her being, a primal, burning determination. Would she uncover the truth behind the darkness, or let it swallow them whole? The shadows whispered again, "You cannot save them all. What will you decide?" And with that haunting question echoing in her mind, Jess steeled herself for a decision that would plunge them even deeper into chaos, redefining the very limits of love and sacrifice. The darkness wasn't finished with them yet. Would they find freedom, or forever be lost among the shadows? The silence shattered as Jess felt the ice-cold grip of despair tightening around her heart. The shadows throbbed with malignant energy, thrumming like a live wire. Every moment teetered on a knife's edge, perilously close to plunging them into the abyss. "Sophie!" she cried desperately, but her voice felt swallowed by the darkness. "Mommy!" Max's voice quaked, the sound echoing against the damp walls of the void, as a crescendo of whispers responded. "Eat." "Mommy! Mommy!" "No!" Jess shouted, tearing her eyes from the obscured figure that mirrored the shape of Sophie, its beckoning finger incriminally familiar. This was not Sophie. It was a cruel illusion, something collectively created by the shadows to manipulate her heart. Max trembled beside her, his small frame rigid as if he were caught in a frigid wind. She had to protect him. She had to think. Pipes of terror screamed through her mind. "We can't let it take us," she urged, gripping his hand harder, feeling the warmth of his skin pierce through the supernatural chill that threatened to engulf them. As if responding to her resolve, the shadows around them flickered briefly, disengaging just enough to reveal a narrow path leading deeper into the mist. Maybe there's another way, Jess thought, heart racing with a blend of fear and determination. Sophie needs us. With a deep breath, she started retreating from the figure with Max in tow, inching backward toward the thin thread of light that emerged around the corner, as if inviting them. "This way," she pulled Max closer. But the moment they turned, the child's laughter erupted again, echoing through the mist, a sweet, innocent sound that chilled Jess to her core. "You have to come play! You can't leave!" "No, we won't!" Jess shouted, afraid that the very act of speaking would bind them to the shadows. Eyes watering from the biting cold, Jess stumbled forward along the path that felt more of a suggestion than a reality. The soft glow grew brighter, washing over them in waves that stirred a false sense of safety. Would it be their escape, or a trap laid by the darkness? "Mommy!" Max screamed suddenly, yanking her back sharply. She turned just as the figure surged forward, a twisted visage now revealed, a hollow face of grief, hollow eyes dripping black. It elongated toward them, closing the distance faster than Jess could comprehend. "Mommy, run!" They bolted. Shadows lunged around them like wild animals. Jess's breath came in jagged gasps as she felt the air grow thin, a weight pressing against her chest. Each step freed more of the clutches imprisoning their homeward path. Behind her, echoes of Sophie's sobs melded into the cacophony of the whispers. "Help her! Help me!" "It's a trick," Jess yelled, pushing Max forward, willing him to run faster. "Don't look back." But as they sprinted down the hall, Jess remembered the pierce of the shadow's whisper. You cannot save them all. What if she couldn't save either? A horrific thought nudged against her consciousness. The echoes intensified, pulsating with every step, as if the very darkness were alive and leaning in. A real battle was brewing inside of her, a choice shaping right from wrong, tethered to a single outcome. Sweat trickled down her back, stinging against the numbing cold. They skidded to a halt at a fork in the path, left or right. The shadowy walls closed in, narrowing the space around them. A loud crack resonated from above. Ceiling beginning to cave. Shadows swirling dangerously. "Mommy!" Max's voice was muffled, barely audible over the crackling darkness. "Max, what do we do?" She sensed panic flooding her chest like a poison, her breath short and ragged. The figure was behind them now, more form than shadow. And the whispers seemed to blend, swirling together until there was nothing left but impending doom. In that heartbeat, Jess locked eyes with Max, seeing the fear mirrored in his dilated pupils. She knew they were running out of time. Crouching low, she gripped his shoulders tightly. "We have to choose, now." Before she could think, her eyes darted to the left. A faint glimmer shone through the mist. Was it hope or another lie? "Left," Jess announced, and before the shadows could sweep down upon them, she sprinted toward that narrow sliver of light, with Max following closely behind, heart pounding to uncertain freedom. But the moment they crossed the threshold into that glimmering passage, Jess felt the air shift, a cold laughter splintering through the seams. "Welcome to the game, dear Jess," the shadows hissed. "Choose wisely." And as the darkness began to swirl around them anew, covering every inch of the space they had just entered, Jess couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. What awaited them in this desperate game of survival? Would she uncover the truth, or would she lose everything before the final move was made? The moment Jess and Max crossed into the new passage, an electric jolt coursed through the air. It felt like stepping onto a tightrope stretched over an abyss, the world tilting beneath them. Shadows wriggled in the corners, twisting and spiraling up the walls, eager to pull them down. "Hold my hand, Max," Jess hissed, squeezing tightly as they darted into the light. But the brightness was deceiving, shimmering like a mirage. It crept into their lungs, stifling their breath. "Mommy, I don't like it," Max whimpered, the innocence in his voice striking a chord deep within Jess's heart. "Me neither," she admitted, voice trembling like a fragile leaf in a storm. The whisper swirled faster, growing louder, layers upon layers of confusion clawing at her sanity. "We can't stop. We have to keep moving," she urged, already feeling the shadows gathering, their icy tendrils reaching hungrily for Max. They stumbled forward, suddenly enveloped in a swirling haze that seemed to tighten around them, compressing the space until it felt like breathing through a straw. The path warped underfoot, the light flickering, morphing into dreadful shapes, figures from nightmarish realms pulled from the darkest corners of her mind. "Close your eyes, Max," Jess commanded, desperation tinging her tone. They couldn't let the darkness touch him, just hold on to me. But before she could manage a step, a dissonant scream erupted from within the folds of the mist.
It was tangled with malevolent glee, a wild roar that echoed throughout the passage. She froze, heart hammering against her ribcage as her worst fears clashed in a cacophony of horror. "Max!"
she cried, feeling his small hand quiver in hers. They could not be separated. But how could she shield him from the spiraling chaos? Was Sophie lost in this madness too? And then, amidst the shadows, a blinding flare burst forth, a candle of hope in a storm of despair. It projected the shape of Sophie, arms outstretched. Jess felt the wind of her fear be replaced with a rush of love and need. "Mommy, I can't. My head hurts," Max gasped, collapsing against her leg as if the weight of their journey was too much. "Focus on my voice," she urged, hoisting him up into her arms. The image of Sophie trembled, flickering like a faulty bulb, shadows curling around her. "We are going to get through this." As Jess turned to flee again, the brightness dimmed, revealing hideous faces woven into the darkness, hungrily awaiting their moment. Each jagged grin burned with malice. "You'll never escape, Jess. You'll choose, and it will cost you dearly." "No!" she screamed, pushing past the fear that gnawed at her mind. "We have to go, Max, just a little further." But as they bolted toward the glow, the shadows surged, grasping for them with fierce desperation. They collided into her, pulling them back, whispering their cruel promises. "Give us one, Jess, just one." A torrent of memories flooded her mind. Sophie's giggles, Max's face lighting up at playground adventures. Would their laughter be silenced forever? The walls shimmered with agonizing faces, dreams of lost children, eyes pleading, their tiny voices swallowed in the dark. The glimmer grew dimmer, reduced to a mere thread, a sparkling illusion on the brink of shattering. As despair gripped her, Jess's gaze caught the flickering light overhead, her heart pounding with urgency. An idea sparked. If the light could be real, perhaps. Cloaked in instinct, she surged forward, crashing through the oppressive air with renewed vigor. Finally, they were breaking through to something solid, fast and determined as tangled shadows clawed at their heels. "Run!" she roared again, pushing Max ahead of her with all her strength. As they surged toward the light, reality quaked around them, the shadows thickening, their chilling laughter echoing in a feverish crescendo. Would they make it before the darkness consumed them? With a final explosive burst of strength, Jess propelled herself and Max through the threshold, and they barreled into the light, gasping for breath. But just as they landed, Jess felt a sharp tug, something anchoring her back, chains of shadows clinking around her ankles. "What did you choose, Jess?" the darkness rasped, the whispers weaving tighter. "What will you give to save him?" In the blinding light, she cast one last glance towards the abyss, heart racing. What sacrifice could she muster? As shadows streaked to claim them, the horrors of her choices loomed ever closer. "Max, we can't stop now!" she shouted, panic surging as the weight began to feel all too real. What would the shadows demand, and could she bear the cost? Each moment hung thick with dread as Jess prepared to confront whatever loomed over the edge of light. The world exploded into color as Jess and Max burst into the realm of blinding light, an oasis against the grip of darkness. Jess stumbled forward, heart pounding, the warm glow enveloping them like a protective embrace. Max clung tightly to her, his small body trembling, but safe for now. "Where's Sophie?" he gasped, eyes darting anxiously around. The light danced before them, shimmering as if alive, beckoning their attention. Yet, as Jess looked deeper, Shadows lurked on the periphery, twisting and writhing in the corners, the faint echo of laughter teasing her ears. "Stay close," Jess pressed, gripping her child's hand, determination igniting within her. Together, they ventured further into the light, piecing together what strength they had left. Sophie's voice echoed again in her mind, muffled and desperate. "Help me!" The echoes rang deep, and Jess could feel the pull, the magnetic unease tugging at her heart. Sudden panic seized her. Is it a trick? Is this a lie? The shadows flickered, their whispers curling around her thoughts like smoke, but she pressed on. "We'll find her," she murmured to Max, masking her fear with the confident facade of a mother. As the light grew brighter, it revealed memories, fragments of laughter caught in its golden rays. For a fleeting moment, Jess caught glimpses of families, faces frozen in joy, and within that warmth, she spotted Sophie, smiling, carefree. "Look, Mommy, it's Sophie!" Max shouted, pointing. "No, wait!" Jess cried out as the light morphed into a doorway. It shimmered like a mirage, and in her heart, Jess knew it might not be real. "We need to be cautious." But Max, fueled by innocence and need, pulled away. "No, I have to see her." He broke free from Jess's grasp, running toward the doorway, just as it flickered again, the brightness piercing through to a haunting darkness. "Max!" Time fractured as Jess felt herself being stretched, longing and despair battling within. "Come back!" But it was too late. The shadows surged, pulling Max towards the void that crept from the edges of light. "Mommy!" he cried, panic coursing through his voice. "Let him go!" Jess screamed at the shadows, hatred burning deep in her chest. She took a step forward, fear spiraling into a fighting fury. "If you want him, you'll have to take me first." The whispers twisted in response, a cacophony of laughter and taunts filled the air. "You cannot choose them both," they rasped, hearts of cruelty pulsing in the shadows. Heart racing, Jess felt the shadows licking at her heels, but she gathered every ounce of strength to push against the darkness. "I will fight," she declared fiercely. "I will save my son." With that, Jess surged forward into the flooding light, arms stretched out, her heart pounding, determination blazing. "Max!" From the swirling mists, something shifted before her. The familiar flicker of Sophie's golden hair danced like a beacon. "Mommy, help!" Jess felt a rush. She knew what she had to do. Leaping forward, she barreled into the doorway, gaining the final few steps. The light enveloped her fully, illuminating the hallway where the shadows recoiled at her approach, hissing and shrieking. Just as she broke through the cutoff, Jess grabbed Sophie, ripping her from the darkness, holding them both against her chest. "I've got you! You're safe now!" she breathed, the weight of fear crashing down, but the warmth of love holding her strong. Then she turned to Max, radiating confidence. "Come here, we're together!" Max, heart racing, reached for his sister, and the shadows shrieked, their power waning as the trio clasped hands, their bond incandescent against the abyss. But the air thickened with urgency, darkness recoiling behind them like a wounded beast. "You can't escape," they howled, desperate and raw. "Together," Jess whispered, gripping her children's hands with unyielding strength. She felt the warmth between them grow, love burning bright, casting out the shadows more than light ever could. "We choose each other, always." With a final exhale, Jess led her children toward the edge of the light, the boundaries shifting as shadows clawed desperately. The whispers morphed from sinister to sorrowful, a chorus of longing fading into unintelligible murmurs. The air trembled around them like a ritual of surrender. And then, nothing. The shadows receded, blown away into nothingness under the weight of their shared love and determination. Together, they stepped into the light, The warmth engulfed them fully, a fresh breath washing over their souls, washing away the pain of what they had faced. "Mommy?" Max breathed, glancing around in awe. "We're safe now," Jess replied, tears filling her eyes. She looked at Sophie, her face bright with relief and strength. "We made it, together." As they stood together, shadows of their ordeal fading behind them, Jess felt the immense weight lift, releasing her from the darkness that clawed at her senses. They had conquered the nightmarish game, the true meaning of family transcending even the darkest horrors. With the power of love lighting their way, they stepped forward into the unknown. But this time, there was nothing to fear. Nothing except hope. Now don't forget, to keep up with these stories and even more heart-pounding adventures, you have to subscribe immediately to the channel. You need to click that bell so you don't miss a beat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more families needing our tales. And flood the comments with your reactions and what you think about this ending. Let's hear your thoughts. Now don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans know how crucial these actions are to support the channel. Let's keep the stories alive.